Welcome, everyone, to the Leading Together podcast. In each episode, we sit down with Delaware's top minds and leaders to share their perspectives in ways that help advance First State Educate's mission, which is to build capacity, raise awareness, and elevate school board leadership across our communities. I'm thrilled with the panel of guests that we have today. They are all very, very busy people, and I'm so grateful that they made time. That we'll get into the fact that the school board being on a school board is a huge time commitment. But they've really been so generous. And the topic for today is the school board leadership, is the leadership of the school board. So we're fortunate to have either presidents or vice presidents of our school boards. I'll introduce them. So we have Jason Heller from Brandywine School District, longtime advocate since 2016, started with the referendum. He's currently board president, and he also works as the director of partnership growth for International Workplace Group. And he's the founder and executive director of Brandywine Bots, which is a nonprofit dedicated to youth STEM education. We also have YF Liu, who's with the Christina School Board. He's the parent of children in the Christina School District, and he's personally invested in its success. He serves as the vice president on the school board, and he's committed to advancing equity, safety, and inclusion. He holds a master's degree in patient public health from Johns Hopkins and a master's in social work. So his approach is informed by that background, but also his professional background in healthcare leadership and in crisis management, because he was also a volunteer firefighter. So a life there of community service. And also with us today, Dr. Tashiba Graham, who's with the Appoquinimink School Board. And she holds an MBA in healthcare administration, but also has deep, deep, deep community ties. She serves as the vice president and brings professional and parent perspectives to her role on the board. But what's most interesting is that academic and professional background in public administration and business with terminal degrees gives her a unique perspective as an elected official. So thank you all so much for joining me today. I'm thrilled to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
All right, so let's jump right in. Every school, I started in the beginning, every school board needs people who are willing to do more. It's extra time, it's extra work, it's extra commitment. You being here today with me is extra. And I want to understand, and I'd love for the audience to hear just from you, what drove that choice? Why did you decide to join a school board and give more of yourself to your community? So I don't know who would like to start. Maybe Dr. Graham?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, it was personally driven from the perspective of representation as a parent. I have a student in the district, and also coupled with a personal interest, a vested interest in special education. And so it's two-pronged for me. It's the special education component along with being a parent in the district. I think there was a gap on our school board from that perspective. So that was my personal motivation for joining the board. And then once joining, obviously having a very eye-opening experience in which we've been able to identify other opportunities to make an impact. So I may have started off on the path of special education, but have quickly learned and growing into other areas of interest that have certainly presented opportunities.
That's fantastic. So it's a continuous journey
Absolutely.
Of reasons why. That's great. I'm going to join Vic Leonard from Red Clay to our panel. And as he joins, Mr. Heller, can you share your motivation?
Sure. Like you said, it started with a referendum. I had, I guess, relatively recently in the few years prior moved to Delaware from New Jersey. And obviously referendums are different everywhere else in the country. So I didn't quite understand why there had to be a vote to just pay basic expenses. So, I attended a bunch of the meetings during them to learn more, and I ended up joining the committee that was advocating for that referendum in BSD at the time, and that kind of was the start of it. So I quickly became the treasurer and then president at the kids PTA, and just from attending school board meetings, I was just very interested in seeing how I could contribute more and kind of be part of the solution and the path. And here I am.
That's wonderful. So sort of some similarities there with it emerging, but two unique district contexts, right? Different reasons in different districts. Lou, how about for you? Why did you decide to run for school board?
Right. Great. Absolutely. So I would say to give back to the community. So my family moved to America in Lewis, Delaware. We went to Cape and Lopez School District in 1996, and I am the product of public education, and then I am giving back because thanks to the public education, they provided me with free breakfast and lunches. And then also taught me how to speak English when I didn't speak English when I come to this country. So
Mhm.
giving back to the community that has raised me is the least I can do to really provide and also perpetuate this great institution that is providing upward mobility to everybody that wants it.
I totally believe that public schools, they open up, they are a path to socioeconomic mobility and freedom and prosperity. I agree. So I mentioned at the top of the show that school board, you are all leadership inside of the school board. So independent of your own reasons for why you joined and wanting to give back, you took on additional responsibility. So could we talk a little bit about what that means? What does it mean to be a president or a vice president of a school board? What made you raise your hand and say, not only are you giving for all the reasons you just said, but you want to provide leadership to this board? So maybe I'll start with you this time, Jason.
Sure. I mean, ultimately, I guess I'll talk about why I had a desire to step into the president's role. And I think because I had heard, especially over the past couple of years in the community, that they were really like seeking, far more transparency and accessibility and a collaborative relationship with the board than, maybe traditionally exist, and that expectations were changing. So, like, I don't think I pursued the role because there was something necessarily wrong before. I
Mm-hmm.
pursued it because I felt the community was ready for a slightly different approach, and I wanted to help kind of create that approach. And then I guess to your real question is, what does being a leader on the board mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's crafting or creating the conditions that lead to effective governance. So listening to the community, understanding their hopes and their concerns, and ensuring, I guess, at the end of the day that those perspectives inform all of our work. But on the flip side, it also means, I think, promoting the great work that's already going on in the district to families and other stakeholders. So it's really advocacy in both directions, ultimately rooted in the idea that the board is the community's representative body, and that carries, I think, the responsibility for us all to lead with transparency and fairness and accountability. And so that's what I thought I could bring to the table, and that's why I sought out a leadership role.
That's admirable, really. I think, and it's important. I think it's also, I appreciate everyone being on the show, because I do think it's important for the community, the larger Delaware community, to hear directly from the wonderful people who are in these leadership roles on our school boards. Lou, how about you?
Yeah, first and foremost, I want to echo what Jason was saying, especially about representing the values and also the dreams and the wishes of our community. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to step up, because I was hoping to have that presence of stability on the board, so I can provide more of a harmonizing way to get everybody to work together and remind everybody why we're here. We're here to not just to serve the community, but also to really perpetuate and keep this dream
Mm-hmm.
alive for our communities. And then furthermore, just to stepping up, just coming from healthcare, one of the cultures I've been practicing is called just culture, is to really
Mm-hmm.
create this psychological safety where we courageously call out some of our mistakes and errors, but also offer ways to do better. Because just because we're on the top of our current organization doesn't mean that we never make mistakes. In fact, we're just as human as all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And my goal and my action will be, I will also, hold myself to account and lead by example to give everybody on the board that understanding that it is okay that we're not perfect.
Mm-hmm. So important. So important. We are all human, and we all make mistakes, but we're doing the best we can. Tashiba, how about for you, this leadership role?
I would say it's the bi-directional advocacy for sure. But I think what has kind of risen to the top for me is being able to educate the community on different aspects of board governance, board issues, concerns,
Mm-hmm.
opportunities, just something as simple as, public comment all the way down to, as large as the referendum, right? And so for me, it's being able to represent the community as a leader, as an informed leader, that can share not only their perspectives, but also provide context. I find that what's the saying? The devil's in the details, right? So being able to provide those details, being that listening ear, and then also, I think highlighting, as Jason was saying, highlighting the good work that is currently happening in the district, recognizing the opportunities and driving for success in that regard. And I think for me, my pathway to leadership, I actually wasn't seeking a leadership role. I was nominated, by my peers. And I mean, candidly, I was a bit taken aback by it. I had only been on the board for a year. And so this is my second year serving as the vice president. And so it's been a learning curve for sure. But as an executive healthcare leader, there's a lot of transferable skills that I think I've been able to apply in my role as the vice president of Appo School Board.
I think that's a great point. I mean, you each bring your own professional experiences to the role, and that is a huge strength. I mean, that's a lot of leverage to be able to know how to make. These are very, very complicated decisions. And as Tashiba said, the details matter. And if you want to get something done, you got to know the details. So let's talk a little bit in this second segment about how boards actually work. And Wyatt, I'll start with you. What's the technical role of a school board, of a president or vice president, setting the agenda, keeping the process moving, the conversation moving, making sure the board is focused on learning and growth?
Sure. So at the end of the day, whether or not we're a president, vice president, or just a member, we still hold one vote. However, being that individual who is seen either in the president or the vice president seat, it is to set the agenda, also to conduct those public meetings that needs to be done. So one of these decorum is using Robert's Rules of Order, and to make sure that you understand some aspect of the parliamentarian procedure, how to ensure that the meeting carries forward, but also, we don't make or commit any potential errors where it may not be transparent, whether it's truly appear to be transparent or not having actual transparency in some of these meetings. But furthermore, as an individual who is leading, we basically represent almost the face of the district. So we have to, not only we're holding ourselves to the highest standard to begin with, but we also have to have that extra level restraint and extra level empathy, but also like that leadership with the ability to demonstrate to the public, not just that we're here to pretend, but we're here to do work. We're down to business. We stand on business, so to speak. And it definitely it's a very delicate balance, but it's also a very rewarding experience knowing that there is a difference that you're making, and then also remind our former, my fellow colleagues that hey, we're here for students. We're here for student achievement, because any adult behavior, let's leave it outside the boardroom. We're here to help our kids and lead our community.
Yeah. So leading by example, and also being, being the face, it's a lot of, I think, additional responsibility, I think, but you're describing it in a way that makes a whole lot of sense. And I'm just curious, Tashiba or Jason, does that resonate with either of you two? Is anything similar, different?
Yeah, I think it's similar. I think, it depends on kind of your role. Vice president is different than being the president. But as, YF said, regardless, there still is a high level of accountability and responsibility that we have, not just to the community, but to the school, the leadership, everyone involved in our schools. And so I think it's a balance. And I think what I always find interesting is the conversation of Robert's Rules, right? And trying to ensure that there is a high level of compliance in order to ensure that your meetings are progressing, or otherwise you'll be there for hours and you're not kind of producing anything of value, right? So I think sometimes that's taken for granted, but it is highly important in us being effective leaders to ensure that there's compliance around that and that we're driving that message home and kind of teaching it to each other, as some of us may come to the board with other experiences that allows for us to drive that efficiency that's needed in a school board meeting, for example. And so I agree with YF in his commentary as well.
Mm-hmm. Jason, for you?
Yeah, similar thing. I mean, I think tactically, I guess, are that one of the most important things as a board leader, or the chair, is to have the feel of the meeting that everybody is fully informed, they're prepared, right? They're able to contribute freely. And for me, that just means being intentional about ensuring that every board member has equal access at the same time to all the information they need and an open opportunity to share their viewpoints. Like, I know specifically that, I mean, since I've really been on the board, but especially like as a chair of a meeting, I work really hard to stay as neutral as possible and not intentionally or accidentally set expectations or signal how I think the board should lean on a topic. And like, when I do have a strong opinion, I try to be the last person to speak, so there's not a perception that my views are somehow steering the conversation. So I think there's like a art to keeping the discussion respectful and on topic. And I do say we're really fortunate that, our entire board currently operates with that shared commitment. And I mean, I guess at the end of the day, that makes my job really easy this year, is that everybody's committed to being there for one reason.
I want to thank all of you, though, because these are such great answers. And one of the things that First Aid Educate really focuses on is providing training and capacity building. And so the question just in my mind is like, okay, this is great. You all are doing a great job in the roles that you're currently in. A little bit of it is on the job training. A little bit of it is knowledge of Robert's rules. A little bit of it is how knowledgeable the other members of the board are, right? But what happens, if you arrive with no previous knowledge, right? I mean, this sort of seems like these would be a leadership, cultivating board leadership, or maybe succession planning for the board is something that we could be intentional about so that leadership is cultivated from within. How does that land as an idea?
I agree. I mean, I can speak in our district. I don't, in my time on the board, I don't think there has been, for lack of a better term, a succession plan, right? I think that our board officers have kind of naturally appeared. I don't know if that makes sense. We've always had a really collaborative approach to choosing the board officers, and I think in my time, even just in this past year where I moved on to president, the previous board president withdrew their name from consideration because I guess they agreed with what my philosophy on this next year was. And I've seen that happen many times over the year, where I just think we're in a really fortunate position that our boards have tended to, like I said earlier, just 100% committed, the entire group, to the best interests of the community and the district. And there's been very few times, if I could even count them, where anyone has let anything else get in the way, whether it be politics or disagreements. Like, I think we're really fortunate in that aspect.
And I want to hear from YF and from Tashiba on this point. But what I'm really, really happy about is that this example from Brandywine is now being broadcast in Delaware, right? Because I think, there's a lot of talk about school boards, but I'm not really sure that every Delawarean knows exactly what the school boards are supposed to do. And I think highlighting these examples of good governance and good leadership goes a long way to strengthen public trust in the institution. So thank you so much, Jason, for sharing that. I think it's a great example of board leadership.
I think if I can just underpin some of that, I would add that the opportunities around creating policy and obviously governing the superintendent is key, right? One would argue those are our two primary responsibilities. And I think that's kind of generally said. And then you get on the board and you're like, wait, there's so many other responsibilities that you can't possibly only kind of address policy apart from anything else, or even, oversight of the superintendent apart from anything else, because obviously his or her job, the assessment of his or her job is inclusive of all things that kind of happen on a day-to-day. So it's really hard to like parse those things out. So you find yourself needing to identify and leverage like your strengths and say, okay, this is the area I'm going to kind of focus on, which kind of, correlates back to my comments at the outset. And I started off very much interested in special education and advocacy, and still am, but have quickly kind of evolved into trying to become, a good liaison, if you will, for the community for the financial aspect of the district, right? And so for me, it's a lot of that kind of ongoing growth and learning opportunities, as you said, Julia, that kind of OJT that happens, but also there is value, I think, in cultivating and training those kind of from within. And I think APPO is probably has a good foundation for that, because APPO has had a lot of school board members that have been on the board 10 plus years, 10, 15, 17 consecutive years, right? So there's an opportunity to provide some of that insight as to what's needed to kind of run an effective, efficient board, but always space and growth for fresh eyes, if you will. So I think it's always an opportunity.
So important with that point you just made about, leveraging people with a lot of experience on the board. I mean, and that's one question I have. And so I welcome suggestions for, but how do we capture the knowledge? I'm not an expert in school boards. I'm building the mechanism and the system to be able to disseminate information, right? But people who have deep experience, I mean, how do we capture that and give that to others? And it might be that from APPO, it goes down to Milford. I don't know. I mean, I don't think that it has to be just a Newcastle County thing, but I couldn't agree more that really people who can be mentors and have that depth of experience are so, so important.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
YF, from the Christina point of view?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. I just want to address real quick with Tashiba was saying about the governing and then the managing of the superintendent. We have the policy and procedures to give that guardrail for the superintendent to operate, because we can make it as wide or as narrow as you can, but really it also comes down to the superintendent, how they will vibe with the guardrail, because at the end of the day, you kind of have, it's like a symbiotic relationship, where if you have a superintendent that is strictly following the rules, but you want to encourage them to be more creative, especially to be adaptable, to quickly pivot at changing situations. But also you don't want to make it too wide to make too many risky decisions, because in government, right, statistically speaking, making too many risky decisions will also be very expensive and very difficult to undo. So those are some of the balancing acts. So now going back to talking about, transferring some of these experience and knowledge up and down the state. So Christina, as we all know, is a very unique situation. We are probably the nation's last several non-contiguous school district, where we are bisected by a school district with a very relatively long distance, right? We have a massive majority within the suburban side, but also a very significant population and a footprint in the city, which means that we have to balance and listen to voices from all aspects of the school district, but also to write and to create, and then also to execute some of these policies and some of these plans as best as we can, to be as equitable as we can, to provide that best possible situation where you can really honor, right, free and appropriate education for all.
I love, that's a great answer. I want to standing invitation, want to come back with the Reading decision. The WSA would love to talk about the challenges and complexities of that. I don't envy anyone who's trying to navigate that. Very, very difficult. Takes a lot of time and focus to attend to the financial and the human details. So standing invitation for that one. But I think it helps us transition into this last segment, which is really about the community, connecting to the community, and what's a board member's role in the community. How do you have two-way communication? And sometimes you wear different roles. Like a firefighter, someone who's an executive, someone who's who founded a nonprofit. I mean, you're not wearing one hat. Each of you have multiple hats. And I don't know who wants to share a story, but I'm sure that there is one of when you're in the supermarket and somebody sees you or you're getting a cup of coffee and here's the time for me to tell you, here's my issue. What's that like? I mean, I just really, really appreciate how much you're doing for your Delaware communities.
I mean, if I can.
Oh, go ahead, Jason.
Oh, no, after you.
I'll kick us off. I think it's exactly that, just in terms of being accessible, right? So it's whether you're seeing us kind of in public, whether you're emailing us. I know in Appo, I'm sure for like all of you, lots of emails, coming through. You have public comment. And I think for me, it's just truly wanting the community. And I feel confident that they do know that I'm accessible, and that not only that I'm going to try really hard to connect them with the right resource to get the answer that they need. Because a lot of times it's not you in particular that can change it, but you can connect them with the right person that has the answer for them, right? So they can kind of get the solutions that they need, hopefully in that moment, or help them work through a process. And it goes back to my earlier comment about being an effective liaison, if you will, in that we are trying to connect the community oftentimes with respective leaders throughout our school districts to get the solutions needed in that moment, or at the very least, help them understand the process. Because let's face it, we don't always, everyone isn't always 100% satisfied with our answers or our responses. But as long as we're making an effort to kind of what I say, close the loop, then I think we're being effective, right? And that's just the nature of leadership. Not everything that you're going to do that everyone is going to like, right? So it's striking that balance. But also, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the importance of having some level of boundaries, because I think that the community will certainly test those boundaries at any given point. So I think as much as I welcome you approaching me in the grocery store, also be accepting of my answer to say, here's my phone number, here's my email address, feel free to follow up with me. I'm kind of like in a rush. I have my kids and I'm kind of like doing my own thing as a community member, right? So I think, I think there also always has to be space and time for a mutual level of respect, right? And so for me, that's the underlying factor in terms of being an effective not just member of the community, but representation of the community and the district, and trying to strike that balance.
So many great points in that. And I was nodding as you were going. I saw, Jason, you were also nodding, but what's it been like for you?
I mean, so I was going to share, one of my focuses, I think, as I moved into the president's role, was to increase accessibility and you had used the word two-way communication. So one thing that I started doing almost right away, I think within a week of becoming president, is creating like short educational videos on social media about things that are going on in the district. And the feedback on that has been overwhelming almost. Just last night, I posted a 5-minute video, and right before we started this, it has over 12,000 views.
Wow.
Right, in less than 24 hours. So I think that, one, that shows that the community is hungry for clear, accessible information. I mean, in most of the videos, I'm not taking a position. I'm just sharing like data and details on something that's going on. And to your point about being stopped. So just a couple of weeks ago, I was having lunch during my lunch break at a restaurant, and a woman came and just sat down in the booth with me. And she goes, "Oh my gosh, I just saw one of your videos." And it turns out, so she's a resident, an alumni, and a retired teacher from the district. And we had a great conversation, about 15 minutes, about, and her kids recently moved from out of state back into the area to attend one of our schools. So it was a great conversation, but that was my first recognition from a video. It was very interesting. She goes, "I just saw your video." But I think that's been a tool that's been more effective than I would have imagined it would have been.
It does take a lot of time and effort, though, to do those things. I mean, those videos are not, I struggle with just maintaining our communication flow, so yeah. But once they're out there, I think then they benefit everybody. And Lou, round us out for Christina.
Yeah, so huge kudos on you guys, like, actually reaching out. For me, I'm known as the bridge builder because I'm coming from a different perspective. I have like the immigrant perspective, the Asian perspective, but also more importantly, I actually make the intentionality to reach out to people who would disagree with me the most. Not only because I enjoy the punishment. I'm just kidding. I don't. But it really keeps me in like a perspective of continually trying to learn, right? If my political spectrum is different than the person I'm engaging with, or some of my voting decision that is very different than what they wanted me to do, I will intentionally reach out to them because I want to hear their perspective. Because a lot of time where I think there's a lot of discontent out in the open is due to that lack of open dialogue and open communication where a lot of people are afraid of reaching out because I have this policy of no wrong door. You come in, you ask me a question, I will do my best to connect you with whatever resource you can find. And even if you come in and you say, hey, I really don't like the policy that you guys are creating. Well, I'll ask, like, what do you not like about? Well, X, Y, and Z. Well, maybe because it's difficult for my family to have access to. There you go. Now we have something to talk about. And then I can be very human. I'm like, look, I actually acknowledge this. So tell me what will make it better. Because at the end of the day, we're serving the public. So if we're not serving them, then we're not doing our job. I'm not saying that it's going to be perfect. That's why we practice, right? Even doctors, they practice medicine. They continuously to get better. So we're going to continue to find our way to be intentional, to really meet them where they are. Because they, kind of what Jason and Tashiba were saying, like, nobody's going to be born with like the knowledge of how to run a school board, or even how public education works. Just like the number of regulations and laws in this sector is like regulating a nuclear power plant.
There is a lot.
Yeah, so it's intimidating. And so how do we get the parents, whether they go to like say Christiana High School or Newark Charter, like they should have the ability to understand how public education works, because then it'll give them a perspective, potentially even be an ally of public education.
For sure.
And that is going to be my goal, is to try to do my best, trying to inform the public in the most objective way possible. And, kind of just to end with some of the conversation is like, I'm not a huge fan of like calling something as disinformation or misinformation, because at the end of the day, some of those pieces that people write sometimes on Facebook, social media, they're their own personal opinion. Very seldomly, they are pieces written by somebody who is paid to do so. So when they have this opinion, they obviously feel some kind of a way because of a root cause analysis. So we need to reach out to them and say, hey, why do you feel the way that you feel? And how can we get you to get more engaged and really help us to do better? So, I always tell the public, hold me to account. How do we do that?
That's fabulous. I this has been just a wonderfully inspiring conversation for me to hear from you. I'm so grateful that you were able to find the time for us to be able to record this so that we get a chance to share who you are as leaders with the rest of the community. I thank you for the work that you do. That First Aid is here and me personally to do whatever you may need. If the district has a need or there's an initiative, if we can help with engaging the community or anything you might need. I am so, so thankful for what you're doing. And really, my hat is off to you. And I'm thrilled that the examples that you've shared tonight can help other school board members who maybe weren't thinking about things the exact same way. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Julian.
Take care.
And thanks to our audience for watching today. And you can find more resources on the Knowledge Hub. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Leading Together podcast.